I was 19 years old when everything changed. When he changed everything. My neighbor, a 40-year-old cop. He was tall, built, confident, the kind of man who didn't take no for an answer. I never thought of him that way. I never imagined he saw me that way. Until the night he made me an offer. One I should have refused. One I couldn't refuse. Because when a man like him wants something, he takes it. And now there was no turning back. I never thought a man like him would look at me that way. Not Officer Hayes. Not my 40-year-old neighbor. The cop everyone in the building respected. But that night, when he made me an offer I should have refused. I knew everything was about to change. It started like any other night. I had just gotten home from a long shift at the cafe. My clothes smelling like coffee and sugar. My feet aching as I walked into the lobby of my apartment building. I heard a deep voice behind me. Late night, I turned around, and there he was, Officer Hayes. Tall, built, dominant, his dark uniform stretched over his broad chest. The badge on his hip glinting under the dim hallway light. His short, cropped dark hair was slightly messy. Like he had just finished a long shift himself. I had seen him 1,000 times before. But tonight something felt different. I forced a small smile. "Yeah, you too." He nodded, stepping closer. "Yeah, but I don't mind long nights." His voice was lower than usual. Slower. And when his gaze dragged over me, up and down, lingering just a little too long, I felt it. A shift. A tension I couldn't ignore. I swallowed hard, suddenly aware of how close he was. The way his broad shoulders blocked most of the dim hallway light. The way his deep blue eyes pinned me in place. There was something in his expression. Something I had never seen before. Or maybe I had just never let myself notice it. He exhaled slowly. "You ever think about doing something you know you shouldn't?" My stomach tightened. I tried to laugh it off. Like what?" He smirked. And then he said it. "The offer that would change everything. Come upstairs with me," he murmured. My heart stopped. I blinked. "What?" He took another step forward. So close now that I had to tilt my head to keep looking at him. "You heard me," he said, voice deep, steady. "Come upstairs. Just for a little while." I should have said no. I should have laughed, made an excuse, walked away. But I didn't. Because the way he was looking at me, like he already knew I was going to say yes. It did something to me. Something I couldn't explain. Something I couldn't fight. My pulse pounded in my ears. "This is crazy," I whispered. His smirk deepened. "I know." He reached up, fingers grazing my wrist, testing. And when I didn't pull away, his grip tightened. "Come on, kid," he murmured, voice like a challenge. "Say yes." My breath hitched. I should have resisted. I should have run. But instead, I nodded. "Okay." The second I said it, his smirk faded. Not in surprise. Not in hesitation. But in satisfaction. Because he had been waiting for this. For me. And now he wasn't going to let me go. The second the words left my mouth, "Okay," I knew there was no turning back. Officer Hayes' smirk didn't fade. If anything, it deepened, like he had been waiting for me to break. And now that I had, he wasn't going to let me go. He didn't say anything, didn't ask me if I was sure. Because he already knew. Instead, he let his grip on my wrist tighten slightly. And then he led me upstairs. My pulse hammered in my ears as we reached his door, apartment 5B. I had walked past it 100 times before. but I had never been inside. Until now. He unlocked the door. Stepping inside, I hesitated, because this was it, the moment I could still walk away. But when I looked up, he was watching me, his blue eyes dark, patient, like he was giving me one last chance to stop this. One last chance to say no. But I didn't. I stepped inside, and the second I did, the door clicked shut behind me. The apartment was dimly lit. Soft yellow light spilled from the kitchen, casting long shadows over the dark leather couch. It smelled like coffee, leather, and something distinctly him, something masculine, familiar, dangerous. I swallowed hard. This was really happening. "Drink?" he asked, his voice breaking the silence. I shook my head. "Not thirsty." He chuckled. Then he stepped closer. Every inch of space between us disappeared. His presence was overwhelming. His height, his broad chest, the weight of his gaze on me. I should have been nervous. I should have been scared. But all I felt was anticipation. His fingers brushed against my forearm. Slow, testing, like he was still waiting for me to pull away. But I didn't. So he took one step closer. And another. Until my back hit the wall. His hand found my chin. Tilting my face up, his thumb traced my jaw. Soft, deliberate, like he was memorizing me. Like he wanted me to feel every second of this. I barely had time to breathe before he murmured, "You ever think about this before, Jamie?" My throat went dry. I should have said no. I should have denied it. But the problem was, I had thought about it. Late at night, in passing moments, in ways I never wanted to admit. And from the way his smirk slowly faded. From the way his grip tightened just slightly. He already knew the answer. I exhaled shakily. "I don't know." I whispered. His lips twitched. "Wrong answer." Then he leaned in, and before I could think, before I could talk myself out of it, his lips brushed against mine. The kiss was slow at first. Testing, like he wanted to see if I'd pull away. But I didn't, because the second I felt his mouth on mine, the second I felt the warmth of his breath, the roughness of his stubble brushing against my skin, I was gone. His hand slid to the back of my neck. His braced against the wall beside me. I gasped softly against his lips. But he just deepened the kiss. Like he had been waiting for this. Like he was claiming what he already knew was his. And I let him, because maybe I wanted to be. When he finally pulled away, I was breathless. So was he. But unlike me, he looked completely in control. Like he had known this would happen. Like he had just been waiting for me to catch up. His thumb brushed against my lower lip. "You still don't know?" he asked. I swallowed hard. And for the first time, I gave him the real answer. "No, I know now." His smirk returned. "Good." Then he kissed me again. Again. And this time there was no hesitation. The second time he kissed me, there was no hesitation, no teasing, no testing, just fire, just him. His hands were on me now. Not just grazing, holding, claiming, like he had been waiting for this. Like he wasn't going to let me go now. And the craziest part, I didn't want him to. I barely noticed when his grip shifted. When he pressed me harder against the wall. All I knew was the way my pulse hammered in my chest. The way his fingers traced the curve of my jaw. Like he was memorizing me. The way I melted into him. Like this was always going to happen. His lips moved to my neck. Slow, deliberate, my breath hitched. I had never been touched like this before. Never felt someone this sure. This dangerous. And yet I let him. "You okay?" he murmured. Voice rough. I nodded. Too fast. Too eager. He chuckled against my skin. "Yeah, you are." His hands tightened on my hips. For a moment, I wondered if this was real. If I had actually let it happen. But the warmth of his breath against my skin, the way my body responded before my mind could catch up, told me that it was. That I had already crossed the line and there was no going back now. His lips brushed against my ear. His voice lower this time. "You still think this is a mistake, Jamie?" I exhaled sharply. I should have said yes. Should have told him that we were getting carried away. That this was insane. But instead, I whispered the truth. No. That was all he needed to hear. His grip on me tightened. His smirk disappeared. And the next kiss, it wasn't slow. It wasn't careful. It was claiming. Because now he knew I was his. I didn't fight it. I didn't want to. And when his hands moved lower, when he lifted me effortlessly off the floor, I let out a shaky breath. Because this wasn't just a kiss anymore. This was him taking what he wanted. And for the first time, I was letting myself want it too. I never thought I'd be here. Pinned against the wall. My neighbor. A cop. A man twice my age. His hands on me. His breath against my skin. His lips still lingering on mine. And the craziest part, I didn't want him to stop. Officer Hayes' grip on me was firm. Steady. Like he had no doubts. Like he knew exactly what he was doing. Meanwhile, I was still catching up. Still trying to figure out when I lost control. When I let this happen. But maybe I had never been in control to begin with. His deep voice broke through the silence. "You look nervous, Jamie." I, 1304, swallowed. "Maybe I am." His lips twitched. Not quite a smirk. Not quite a smile. But his grip on my waist tightened. And when he leaned in, when his lips brushed my jaw, he murmured, "Don't be." I let out a shaky breath. Because that was easy for him to say. He had nothing to question. He had probably done this before. But me? I wasn't supposed to want this. I wasn't supposed to want him. But now I did. Still thinking too much. He muttered. His fingers trailed up my spine. Slow. Teasing. Like he wanted to pull me out of my head. Like he wanted me to focus on the way he felt against me. And the worst part, it worked. Because the second he kissed me again, the second his hands tightened around my waist, my mind went completely blank. This wasn't careful anymore. It wasn't slow. It was deliberate. He was taking his time, making sure I felt everything. And when he pulled back, when his forehead rested against mine, he asked the one question I had been avoiding. "Tell me what you want." My breath hitched. I couldn't answer. Because I didn't know how. Because if I said it out loud, there was no going back. But then he tilted my chin up, made me look at him. And suddenly it wasn't just about what I wanted. It was about what he already knew. I exhaled. Then barely above a whisper, "You." His jaw tightened. His eyes darkened. And the second the word left my mouth, he claimed me all over again. The second the word left my mouth, "You," something inside him changed. The teasing was gone. The smirk gone. All that was left was hunger. Control. Possession. And the moment I saw that look in his eyes, I knew there was no stopping this now. His grip on me tightened. His lips crashed into mine. Not soft. Not testing. But deep. Demanding. Like he had been waiting for me to finally say it. To finally admit what we both knew was real. I barely had time to breathe before his hands were on me again, moving over my waist, sliding up my back, like he wanted to memorize every inch of me. Like he was making sure I felt this. Felt him. And I did. God, I did. He pulled away just enough to whisper, "You're mine now." His voice was low, rough, certain, like he wasn't asking, like this was already decided. And instead of panicking, instead of second-guessing, I let my fingers tangle in his uniform. I let myself want it. Want him. And for the first time, I didn't care about what it meant. His lips trailed down my neck. I sucked in a sharp breath, my hands tightening on his shoulders. He chuckled softly against my skin. "Still nervous?" I swallowed hard. "Not anymore." He pulled back slightly, just enough to look at me. His blue eyes were darker now, focused, like he was seeing all of me. Like he had just claimed something he had been waiting for. And I let him, because he was right. I was his now, and I wasn't going anywhere. By the time we finally pulled apart, I was breathless. So was he. But unlike me, he looked completely in control. Like this was exactly how things were supposed to be. Like he had been waiting for this. For me. And now he wasn't letting go. His fingers brushed against my jaw. Slow, deliberate. He smirked. "Still think this was a mistake, Jamie?" I swallowed hard, shook my head. Because no, this wasn't a mistake. This was the most certain I had ever felt. I had spent so much time fighting it, pretending I didn't feel anything. But the truth? I had been his long before tonight. I had just been too afraid to admit it. Until now. His voice dropped lower, steadier. "You're mine now." A statement, not a question, not a request. And I didn't argue, because I knew he was mine, too. I let out a slow breath, then barely above a whisper, "I don't want to hide this." His smirk faded slightly, replaced with something deeper. Something real. "Then don't," he murmured. And just like that, it wasn't a secret anymore. It was real. He kissed me again. Not rushed, not desperate, but slow, certain, like he knew this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. I spent so long fighting it, telling myself this wasn't real, that it was just a moment, that it didn't mean anything. But the truth? I was his before I even realized it. And now there was no more hiding. No more pretending. I knew exactly what I wanted. And this time I wasn't afraid to take it. But what about you? Have you ever ignored a feeling you knew was real? A moment that changed everything? Let me know in the comments. And if this story kept you hooked, don't forget to subscribe, like, and turn on notifications for more stories that make you feel something.